Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-Affleck.
And it's time for...
I abstain to this. UnSpun.
It's your job. It's your job, George.
Abstain. Oh my God. We'll get to this, but
Okay.
The number of abstentions happening in city council again, driving me bonkers.
Let's actually start with this one because we're going to talk about budgets and decisions and what have you. But what you're referencing there is Vancouver City Council, the new city council, the very ABC City Council.
New and you hope improved.
Yeah, well, Let's hope. Let's get some stuff done. Well, getting stuff done. There wasn't, 5 weeks of debating this thing, but the city council actually voted on and passed the new budget increase for the police, the 100 police officers. It was part of the campaign promise for Ken Sam, as well as 100 more nurses, which there's some discussion over what the cost truly will be and what the amount is. It's $16 million in this moment, but 3 of the non-ABC council members abstained in councillors Fry, Carr, and Boyle. How do you feel about the abstention?
This would be Green and one city, right? Against what is this massive 8 votes that they are up against. Been there, done that as a councillor, but never abstained in my life in office because I felt when I was in office, abstention is just make a decision. You're not making a decision. It's a decision in the end in favor. It's counted as a decision in favor. Anyway, so just vote in favor then, or vote against and tell us how you really feel. It's just such a weak move. And it's like you're trying to eat your cake and have it too.
Have your cake and eat it too. Right, because they don't want to be held to account by people saying, what do you mean you don't want more police?
How'd that work out for Colleen Hardwick, by the way, who abstained more than any councillor in the history of Vancouver? Where is she now? Bye. Yeah. Not good enough. I don't care what party you're a member of. Not good enough. I pay for your salaries as a taxpayer. Do your job. Make your decisions on behalf of the people of the city. Whether it's for or against, make a decision. That's what I pay you for. Do it. Stop abstaining. Enough of this BS. It drives me nuts, as you can tell.
Yeah, I can tell. And since we've been discussing this, because I think you're right. Jeez, mark this on your calendar. I think you're right, George. Kidding. That it's a yes or no. Like I understand when somebody abstains when they have, skin in the game, let's say, like you own a restaurant with a patio and you're
recused, you leave, then you get the day off. I had to recuse a few times. Not the one was like where my office is in Mount Pleasant, and even though I don't own my office building, I felt, I pay rent here. The rent would probably go up, the taxes will probably go up based on this decision. Right. I don't feel confident that the perception of bias is not going to be there, that people will consider that. So I recused yourself because I got a whole day off.
You just left
from
went for coffee.
I
think that's when you took me for lunch at the Fable Diner.
maybe, yeah.
Hey George, how did you feel about the barge? The barge on the beach, not the bard on the beach, but the barge.
I hated it.
Me too. So it's gone now, right?
I lived down there, and walking down there, it was like a blight. It was ugly. It took up a huge chunk of the walk, this beautiful walk, the views. Yeah. I'm sorry, no, garbage. Get it out of there.
So it was gone a week ago, right? The last pieces removed a week ago. And I mean, it's Thursday, the 24th, at just before 11 a.m. So it was about 10:40, I guess, where I received the press release from the city that the barge is a farewell to the barge. I'm like, a week late? Like, did somebody actually spend man hours writing that release and putting it out? Like, what are we doing?
45 staff that are in the communications department, which, by the way, still exists.
Still 43
Yes, more than that.
I need shots.
Yes.
While we're getting riled up over the things that piss us off with regard to city politics, we're staying in Vancouver on this one. We'll get to Surrey in a second, but staying in Vancouver for this one, the park board.
Yes, your favorite subject matter?
Yeah, different people.
Different people. Same GM.
Same sort of, but I mean, this GM is supposedly very, philanthropic when it comes to the people who have less, and wanting to make sure that
Yes.
those who live in poverty are housed, and that we're engaged in truth and reconciliation. But we're jacking up the price of parking at our parks. How does that?
Why is that, Jody?
Because the bike lane pylons cost a fortune.
How much?
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Hundreds of thousands.
And because you couldn't drive around Stanley Park, nobody went to Stanley Park to pay for a 3-hour parking window. I used to go to Stanley Park for a half an hour. I used to go down there and sit down at Third Beach and be like, look at this beautiful space. I'm just going to sit here and clear my mind and relax. I loved it down there. I would zen out and take in how much I loved my city, and I would slow roll around Park Drive, and I'd stop at Third Beach and I'd pay for my parking for a few minutes, or even back in the old days when it was free. But now it's minimum. Like, it's a minimum. There are families who cannot afford the minimum, guys. They can't. It pisses me off, George.
Subcontracted the parking too, right? So the subcontractor gets a chunk of that money. So it's not all going to the park board. Obviously the park board is challenged with money. I would say, we'll talk about the police maybe a bit on their budget, but maybe the park board should act more like the cops and start with any PR people they have, and they have a few comms people, maybe hire a PR like start playing hardball with the city and say, you know what, you've been strangling us for years. And they have. The city has been cutting and not increasing the budget, and the park board hasn't asked for a lot more money comparatively to what the city's increases have seen. In fact, it's significantly less. They have less money. They have less now revenue potential unless they do this jacking up of rents. And it's a growing city with more needs for parks, and that budget's not meeting over years the rate of inflation. It was equal to the rate of inflation, which is great, but it also was cut a significant amount in 2008, and so I think the park board needs to start, looking at that. But unfortunately, we have a majority of people on the park board that are buddies with the majority of council, so they're not going to play hardball with
one another,
with the council. But
did you see?
Good.
Did you see John Cooper's tweet about retired park board commissioner who saved the Blodell Conservatory? Who
yes,
right?
Yeah.
Did you see his tweet about how they're doing a Christmas lights, holiday lights, something within the conservatory? It closes at 4.
I know. It's like,
it's a light display before it's dark.
It's like the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Seriously, come on, park board. Like, what is going that along with the train, along with this, along with that?
I mean,
of course, it's a hangover from the previous board, which were incompetent, clearly. Yeah. And maybe too late for this new one to really make some changes. But that would be potential revenue neutral decision. Yeah. You can make money off that if you do it properly. So this is insanity. If you go to anywhere, like you go to Capilano Suspension Bridge, that whole thing. Have you seen their lights are crazy? They're great. There's so many
amazing. They're amazing.
It's private sector, but still, like, if you want people, you got to step it up.
But they do it right.
To show up.
There's a place to park. Yeah. You walk in, you can easily get yourself a little bit too expensive hot chocolate, but you're allowed to take it out of the area that you get served it in, and then you go over and you walk through with, and it's this great family fun, not cost prohibitive. And while we're talking about the things that are cost prohibitive, do you know the Christmas market that they're now doing down at the waterfront there at Jack Pool Plaza?
Olympic Park early at Jack Pool Plaza,
yeah. So that used to be by the Queen Elizabeth Theatre, and it was really cute. And you would stop in there and you'd look at the vendors and you'd get your mulled wine and whatever. It's $20 or $25 just to get into the market there. I was like, you what now? You're going to hold on.
It's their decision.
You're going to
they want to
charge me.
That's not a
No, I know, but I was just saying, as far as places to go and things to do that are family friendly and affordable, there, and I get it. I look forward to the P&E Winter Lights because the P&E did a great job during the during COVID, doing that drive-through. They do it right, and they do it so families can afford it. And yes, there are a ton of things that are expensive that need to make money, but you can just go there, right? You can just do it anyway. It's like you pay by the car as opposed to paying by the person. So a family that would have to string together some disposable income if they have any. Anyway, speaking of income, speaking of money, let's talk a little bit about David-Eby making some significant.
I'm looking at my list here. Let's wait.
We should go. Sorry, we should go to the. Do you want to go locally to the police budget? I'm going to
No,
make
well,
it.
the police. I mean, that fits into EB's announcement related to the whole crime thing. But yeah, go ahead. You always leave me. I don't know what I'm doing here.
$230 million
You're the
that will.
professional. I'm just an amateur.
That's not true. But David-Eby coming in hot, I should say, as the new premier of British Columbia, right? For those who have been like not paying attention, we have a new one who's been around a bit, and I'm hearing buzz about some significant shuffle that is to come. Like we might see some ministers change, even though Eby's been a very significant part of the prior Horgan government. This is a new premier with a mandate that is, still within obviously the confines of the NDP, but clearly putting forward what he believes will fix some of what's broken. So we talked about housing, crime, changing the rules with regard around strata within the housing plan to free up more rentals, but also this RCMP budget announcement that he just made, $230 million to be spent over 3 years. Part of me was like, oh, look at you spending more on the RCMP while all this stuff is happening in Surrey. But it's about rural communities. This is about, right?
Yeah, but the budget, that money is actually for police that were supposed to be hired in the first place. So it's a bit of a, talk about spin. I mean, this is money that should have been allocated some time ago for police that are required to be hired based on the math that the RCMP and communities have. So, whatever, it's fine. It's like the housing announcement. I mean, I'm thinking, okay, what is the real story behind this? There's so much detail and all these things that I'm thinking right now he's getting a better honeymoon than Ken Sim is in Vancouver.
Ken Sim's in Doha. He's in Qatar.
I heard him on Jazz's show on CKNW. I was like, oh, well, I'm having a good time over there, I hope. Anyways,
yep, selfies on his Twitter. Anyway,
the bank downstairs window got smashed at the weekend, but no problem. We got this covered.
So before we get into the strata and the housing and the stuff again, and I want to bend your ear on that a little bit because I've had some time to think about it, and I'm like, but before we do that, you just mentioned smashed window downstairs. The amount of brazen gun violence and a stabbing of an 18-year-old outside of a Surrey high school, like. I can't keep up with the police incidents. Like on the Coquihalla closed.
And the
Cafe du Soleil.
I used to go there all the time with my kids when they were little. We lived on a commercial drive and we used to go all the time. It's like, it's madness.
That was a scene out of pulp fiction. You know, people coming in with guns blazing.
Enjoy the World Cup, Mayor.
Right?
And what's interesting right now is like the Vancouver police have the city of Vancouver over a barrel. Like they literally are asking for 11% increase, an 11% increase. That is probably around, I think it's around $50 million. I'm not sure. 50 million. Every $7 million is 1% tax increase. So you're looking at about a 11% budget increase on the police budget probably represents about a 7% tax increase for Vancouverites, for homeowners, just for the police. That's not including all the other things. So it's going to be interesting because I saw the park board punted their budget a little bit, but they really should have punted it down to February. There's no rush for these budgets. These guys should take their time. They have till April to do these budgets. Take your time. I've talked about this before. When a new council comes in, especially a complete rehaul of the previous council, in the case of the park, the same thing. Take your time on the budget because this is your lane, especially your capital budget and your operating. These are two different budgets that you have. One is related to day-to-day operations. The capital is related to infrastructure, building things, pools, things like that. What we writ on the other side of the ballots in every city is like this.
Right.
So, take your time. You don't have to rush this. And I already think the park board's rushing it. They should be pushing their budget through this fast. They should wait till February.
Should we two questions for you here? Well, number one's more of a statement. I'm glad that Ken Sim is a chartered accountant because he's going to come at this in a way that's a little different than maybe a career politician vibe that we have had. That's just somebody who just wrote letters up the food chain for the last 4 years. So I'm hopeful that maybe there will be some due diligence done to find out if the police budget needs to be this to fix what's broken with crime. Then do we take some of the pet projects and dial them down to add over here to make sure that we aren't spiking homeowners to the degree, like homeowners can only manage so much. There are a lot of people who are homeowners that are with a variable mortgage that can barely make their mortgage payment right now. There are a lot of people who are very worried about
their mortgage are coming due. Mine's due in 2024.
Yeah.
I'm like, and I locked in a few years ago, so it's not bad, but probably could have done better if I locked in last year or a year and a half ago. Yeah,
I
it's a
locked in
problem.
last year.
Inflation in general. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know
I
you got a
did.
good rate. I know a
I
lot of
was
people like that.
very
Mine's
lucky.
not
It was
bad.
very
But
fluky. Mine was up due,
just
like
timing.
that,
Yeah,
just timing. But I mean,
yeah.
I've got a window of, 4 years of okay, I can hold on by the skin of my teeth and see what happens with these interest rates, and hopefully with inflation kind of showing some signs of slowing from its peak high of, the spring.
Yeah.
It is slowing like a little bit, so maybe the rates won't be jumping as high as they have been.
They seem to have
Um,
stopped increasing them for the moment, so that's good. But
don't
everything's got more expensive. Everything's got
Don't
more expensive.
say that
Oh yeah,
out
shh.
loud,
So Bank of
George.
Canada. I hope nothing to Bank of Canada.
Jesus.
I know they're big fans.
Jeez.
Bank of Canada's board is listening all the time.
But the
Yeah.
crime that we're witnessing, I think that, like you said, this is the moment, this is the opportunity for policing, for all
Is it
municipal
police?
police.
No,
But
we gotta be careful about that too. And this is,
no, but well, let me finish what I was going to
yeah.
say, because I'm agreeing with the fact that you say you have people over the or have the governments over the barrel in order, like, we got to do something. But will that something equal like meaningful action? Because what we've seen on the downtown east side, and the poverty, the homelessness file, and there's going to be, some significant study put into how the dollars, this is another
Mm-hmm.
piece of the EB pie here. Somebody who was like a human rights lawyer who was very motivated on this file, almost activist
Yep.
level in early days of his career prior to getting
Mm-hmm.
into politics, like the Artera, that's what it's called, right? Like, looking at where the money
Mm-hmm.
is going and how such a small percentage of it hits the actual bottom line. Like, there will have to be something like that when it comes to the policing, because what we're watching going on in Surrey, frankly, is crazy to me. It's crazy to me. Everybody's so busy fighting with one another, and you're Brenda Locke versus your Doug McCallum, who, by the way, was found not guilty this week. Doug
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
McCallum, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they've politicized it so much. Meanwhile, there's like this crazy gun war going on the streets. Like, what are we focusing on here? Like, how unspin that for me?
Well, I will say one thing that EB's talked about is institutionalization, even though he maybe didn't use that word, but talking about building facilities for people who are having mental health care issues, to say the least, and potentially getting into drugs or criminal behavior or both. That this is one of our biggest challenges. I've talked about this many times. In the early
Yeah,
90s, decisions were made about housing and about mental health care, both simultaneously at the same time, and then decisions were made by the governments, not just in BC, but across Canada, across all Western countries pretty much, which led, I believe, to the housing shortage we have today and the homelessness issue we have and the mental health care crisis we have. Uh, uh, Therefore, the crime issue we have, because a lot of these things go together, especially drug and mental
mental
health
health.
care.
Yeah,
And then if you're homeless and you're desperate, so and then there's people who prey on vulnerable people and use
yeah,
them and put them in these situations, and so it's like a terrible 30-year nightmare that we've created that has to be solved, and it can't be solved overnight. And his decision, for example, to say, okay, we're going to allow rentals in all stratas, have to allow rentals, that's great, sure. I lived in a building previously that had strict rules, and then I couldn't sell my unit, and I had to get a special thing to rent it because we had a new place that we bought, and we couldn't sell the other one, and it was humiliating, to be honest, and for me to put in a letter saying I can't afford I need to rent this because I can't afford blah blah blah. You have to kind of tell your personal story.
yeah.
I moved to a building where, and I've always been on the strata councils when I live and I recommend anybody who's in a strata get on your strata council, because God knows crazy things happen in those strata councils. So I've been on my council for as long as I have lived in a strata, pretty
Yeah.
much, given and our current strata, we have had that discussion. We live in Yaletown, and it's a big building, 300 units, and it comes up every once in a while about that issue of, because renters you have challenges because the owner is responsible for them, but the building has to deal with any issues that happen. But
Right.
it's not. I believe it's a good decision, but I think there has to be. That's one little teeny decision of a certain number of units. We're talking on a federal level. The number that I've talked about over the last, since 1993, when Jean Chrétien, a Liberal leader, canceled the housing program. We're talking about over 50,000 units that were not built as a result of that decision. 50,000 units. How many homeless people are there in Canada, do you think?
Probably
Around
50,000. But I'm
Yeah.
gonna argue the point that in between Chrétien and the current federal Liberal government, there was an era of Conservative governments who did nothing to change that back. And
This is the
so
challenge, yeah.
I don't blame one party or another, and some might be quick to do so. I think this is one of those things that you say when it comes around election time, it can super be used as a wedge issue to rally the voter base to do the things, right?
So how does Eby, as a person who was a human rights, he understands, he's a lawyer, has an understanding of fighting government. That's what he did a lot of. How do you embed those kinds of things so it doesn't become political? You look at our healthcare, although you look at Alberta this week. Okay. I don't, oh my God, that speech was, okay. Are you separating or what you're saying is absolutely, let's not get into it because it was completely, because I know we have some
Google Danielle Smith, guys. Google Danielle Smith. Yeah.
Totally it was anti-Canada, the most anti-Canada speech I've ever heard from anybody, including Quebec. It was brutal. They're basically going to war with us, all of us, except for that. Like, it's crazy. I mean, are we in this together or not? Anyways, clearly not from Alberta's point of view. Anyways, my point is healthcare, and that's one of the things she talks about, is embedded. It's something that we expect, and nobody's plays with it. When they've tried here in British Columbia to privatize part, it gets beaten down, and whether you agree with it or not, it gets beaten, goes all the way to the top of the court chain and doesn't succeed. And it's pretty much tried every single possible way to do that, and it's proven in the Supreme Court that you basically can't privatize our healthcare system in any province. So it's proven. It's the case studies are there. So why can't we do that for housing? Why can't we do that for mental health care? Why can't we do that for other things? We do it for drugs. We have rules and regulations for drugs. We change the drugs. Marijuana being the latest example. We change the rule, makes a huge difference in people's lives, stops criminalizing that kind of stuff. We have to think about these things that they don't become politicized. You embed them as a decision, as part of our policies that you can't play with. The only thing government should be doing is making sure if you're in a city, just clean the streets, mow the lawns in the parks, do the stuff that you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
I don't want to be, focus people. And then all the other stuff should be taken care of itself.
I'm going to take us back to the housing strata rental, trying to do something that will fix the fact that there's not enough supply for people looking for a rental, even a market rental, even something, it's just impossible to find a place, right?
100%.
But going after and I know that there are a lot of people that have had strata situations where renters came in without having, ownership, literally ownership of where they were living. They would treat it as almost disposable. They would be less inclined to care for the things around them, perhaps less inclined to have a good relationship with their neighbor. It can be difficult. Now, I'm a homeowner now, so I come from, and I'm not living in a strata. I've made an absolute point of not living in a strata situation because I've heard so many horror stories, seen so many friends have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of leaky condo assessments plunked on top of them, and that scares me. But truly, it's just I always felt, and this is just my opinion, but I always felt like living in a strata environment, you kind of don't get full say of what you own. And your fees could go up at a moment's notice. There's very little you can do about the bad neighbor, whatever. But I also was a renter for the better part of 25 years. And I was one of those renters, George, and I'm seeing a lot of people go, renters are horrifying. And I'm like, well, I always had a pet, always. Found it very difficult in BC and in the Lower Mainland, North Vancouver, and Vancouver proper is where I lived, but always found it difficult to find a place that would take pets. But I always got my damage deposit back. I always paid my rent on time. I was the model tenant. There are a lot of people who are model tenants. I'm
pretty sure that's the mass majority of people, right?
So my question to you, George-Affleck, in this unspun moment, along with the strata, we're going to make it so all stratas must be rental, you're no longer allowed to restrict that. Why not give better powers for those who wish to evict a bad tenant?
Yeah.
If you can
Well, it's
prove the
impossible
tenant
right
is
now with this
bad,
government.
boom, you're out. Right? But
Not only that, they've made it. It's all the powers in the renters' hands now because of this government's decisions in the
yeah,
last during
that's
COVID.
scary.
Not to mention, there's also the cap on raising the rent, which is makes it challenging for certainly for rental only buildings, which renovations you need to have rate of inflation increase. Then there's
Yeah.
the interest rates in general. Condo rentals units basically are drying up because people have to sell these units because right now with interest rates they can't afford to keep these. They can't. It could get devastating in a lot of ways for young people who bought and then suddenly those interest rates double and they're like, oh, I didn't understand that
Why
my
are we not
mortgage
going
now is
after
twice.
Airbnbs too? Right, by the way, right?
Well, why?
Airbnb, because, well, if
Well, we do in
it's
Vancouver.
do we though?
Oh
I
yeah,
know people, I
strict rules.
personally know people who have rentals that they used to rent, that they used to live in, then they moved into another rental, and they're using the rental as an Airbnb. So the people that they've rented from think, but
I'm not a big. My building. We always have this debate again, my strata, and we have a really strict no Airbnb in our building, and I'm like, sometimes the Airbnb is treat our building as renters are sometimes more respectful because they really keep the places clean because they want to make a lot of money off them. I don't know. I think that we also have a challenge on the other hand in the city of Vancouver. Anywhere we are a tourist destination and we have no hotels right now to go
right.
stay at. So Airbnb kind of alleviates that stress. I think the policies are quite strict in Vancouver anyways, and they've been adopted in other communities and other cities. And I think that they have solved a little bit, but the numbers that I learned, and we talk about empty homes and all these things, they're not as devastating as people, as it was all laid out to be. It was about 6% were empty that we could kind of figure out. And 90% of those 6% were in Cole Harbor, one neighborhood in the
one
city.
neighborhood.
They were all just
Ghost
sitting
town.
empty. And what is empty? A lot of them were actually people who were diplomats, and they just didn't. They had bought these places because they wanted to retire here. Now all those people are gone. They sold their places and left. So all these places that were looking at Vancouver as a retirement place have gone.
Right.
That's sad. It has repercussions. I always argued it's about building more of what people can rent as a rental, as a traditional rental, or can afford to buy, or whatever. That's the only. I always say, okay, let's say 10% of the homes are in a situation of being abused for rental or whatever. Okay, that means, but there's 90% that are lived in by people who can afford them or whatever. Or let's even narrow it down into what specific units can we build or can we approve and speed up that people can afford or need or whatever. What are the pieces of property that we can really focus on? What do we own? These are questions that I can never get answers to.
That's
when
the
I was in
part.
office.
That's the part, though. You keep
Build
coming
more.
back to that. Like, why do we not have government build social housing? Like, why do we not have actual great co-ops from
cities have the land, private sector has the land, but the money's got to come from the federal government, and the construction has to come from the province.
But there is money. We've proven over the last 3 years that where there's a will, there's money. And the amount of money that has been spent over the last 3 years with the horrifying pandemic that we have all endured, and we all have PTSD from it, there are so many cracks in society that are now caverns. People are suffering. And if that isn't reason enough, I don't know what is.
The math is simple. If you want to build 50,000 units, multiply 50,000 by $500,000, which would be the average price of a single unit construction, the real estate, all that stuff. 500,000 times 50,000. That's the math. Find the money.
A lot of money.
Build. It's a lot of money.
I'll put it this way. I'd rather have that.
People in Canada.
I'd rather have that than a new $1 billion museum. Okay.
Yes. But also, we have 40 million people in Canada. Share the pain.
I don't care about Canada right now. I care about Vancouver. Yes.
No, but I'm saying take
that. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Take that number. What does it cost all of us? Sorry, Alberta. You got to get involved here. You have homeless people there too. And you shouldn't have to pay for it on your own either. Neither should British Columbia. Neither should the city of Vancouver. We as a country need to come together on the housing file. That's the math. Divided by 40 million, whatever. And
make it so.
And then say, this is what's going to cost us, and this is how we're going to pay for it. And you're going to pay, because it's only one taxpayer. We all know that cliche.
Yeah.
So we have to pay for this. What's it going to cost us? Tell us and start building. Please, can we get enough talk?
Yeah. Unless you want to talk to us on Twitter, which you can, because you can find us at George.
Segue. underscore.
It's not George Segway underscore. It's
Hey, by
George
the way,
underscore.
Guess what? I think Elon Musk made George-Affleck available.
What?
He's gone. So I'm trying to figure out how do I get it, but I can't get it because it'll be confusing to people, right? But I think it's come available. Thank you, Elon Musk.
I think you should just grab it.
I
think you should grab it. I think Amanda, your partner should take over that account and apologize for the things that you say on your underscore account.
Yeah. I have another account. It's CurveComs. You can go see my marketing tweets there if you want.
UnSpunPodcast.com is where you find us. That's where you make sure that you get us direct to your inbox. At Jody Vance on Twitter, Jody with a Y. At Jody Vance on Twitter. I'll see you on Steel and Vance on Check.
I'll see you around. Bye.